How are you feeling about it? What's going on? Heck of a weekend for the pro wrestling world. As you expected, we're going to start with the end of SmackDown Fox collaboration. What? No, I'm just kidding. We're not doing that. They're done. We'll get to that. That's during the week more. We'll get to that. We got to talk about AEW All Out 2024. We got to get into everything that went down on that show. The outrage on social media is unbelievable. Can you believe that an unsanctioned match had things that went to that level? Why did these feuds that had so much built into them peak at the pay-per-view? Why? Why did they push the limit with Daniel Garcia and MJF trying to take each other out? Oh, Willow and Stat have been feuding for 6-7 months. They should have scaled it back a little bit in a Chicago street fight. The main event, coming off of a house burning down, coming off of a home invasion, stalking that's been going on for a year. Why did they go to such lengths? Wait, were they trying to tell a story there a few times? Is that what happened? Did they try to wrap up stories in big ways? Did they call back to things? No. Was wrestling violent on Saturday night? What? Can you believe that? Can you believe that a match that the company didn't sanction went to those lengths? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. None of that. And believe me, I have called out multiple wrestling companies for being violent or over the top for the sake of it. That can be done too much. 100% that can be done too much. But when you do it to peak storylines, when you do it on pay-per-view, not broadcast, not cable, when you do it there, you're doing it for a reason. You're doing it because that's where the stories are going. I am baffled. And I just saw someone say, it's not worth discussing this on X or Twitter or whatever, because forget the discourse. You're not going to have nuanced conversation with people. And you're not. It's why I don't post a lot of like big opinions on social media. I'd rather just do it here because I actually can keep talking past 250 characters, whatever the hell the number is now. As opposed to just, let me just take that tweet and post it. And stuff will get grabbed from this show. I've talked about that. A headline, usually something that is perceived as negative, will get grabbed from the show and posted, and that's what happens. That's the world we live in. I understand that. But I know I have a chance to at least elaborate and go back and forth with you guys in the chat about what you liked or didn't like. And that's fine. I'm not saying, and by the way, I'm not saying you had to like Saturday's show. I'm not saying you had to like All Out. I get it if people were turned off by it. I get that. But in the context, which is so friggin' important, the context of multiple feuds, what happened was understandable. What happened was being built to. It happened to be that multiple feuds got to that level at the same time. So you got a lot of, whoa, what was that? Multiple matches. It was very hard to continue to raise the intensity level. And I think that show did that. It's not easy to do that. And I want to talk about the match structure and the card structure because the way it was laid out worked. I got one thing that I didn't love where it happened, but it built and built and built. When you look at the card and look at what AEW did, you knew Hangman and Swerve was going to main event. You knew they were going to go to crazy lengths, and they did. You have a street fight in there with Willow and Chris. They took it further than I would have expected. You had Ospreay and Pac early in the show. Have an unreal, no gimmicks, no stip match. Just an outstanding wrestling match. You open the show with MJF and Garcia, who have a real personal rivalry. Nowhere near the level of Swerve and Hangman, and nor should anything be at that level. And I'll get to that too. How often you could do this stuff. But I want wrestling to be gritty. I want it to be low down and dirty sometimes. I happen to think that wrestling as a whole, and I get this might be an advertiser thing, it might be about presentation, it might be about who owns company. I think wrestling can get too glossy at times, can look too pretty. I said that about WrestleMania. Now, I'm not going to deny the money that was raked in by WWE. That is what they should be doing. But everything looks so pretty. Like, I didn't feel like at times there was the peak anger. It felt like how would you put it? Like it felt like not a fashion show. That's not the right way to say it. But everything was like so perfect and so much pomp and circumstance, which I get it. It's WrestleMania. It absolutely should be that way. You should have that level. It should feel huge. But I actually think that sometimes that pomp and circumstance takes away from the heat of a feud. Because it's about the entrance, and it's about the music, and it's about the new outfits, and it's about how it's shown on television. Like, I think that can take you out of the heat of a rivalry sometimes, which if you think about it, should, it's WrestleMania. And listen, in the past, this is why rematches are good. You think about years of backlash and how matches went to another level, and they would add stips, or Extreme Rules used to be after WrestleMania. And I got that. You don't want to load up WrestleMania with all these crazy stip matches. You have, Mick Foley and Edge that was put on there to have a WrestleMania moment. That was to get Edge back to where he needed to be. And for Mick to have that moment and do the flaming table and do the Socko with the barbed wire. The presentation WWE is going to put on right now, I said this when I was there. I will continue to say this. They are putting on blockbuster movies. That's what they're doing. Those blockbuster movies make a bunch of money. They draw a lot of eyeballs. There's stars all over them. That's what they are. Fast and the Furious are blockbuster, flying cars, launching cars, The Rock, Vin Diesel, John Cena. It's all that stuff, and that makes a lot of money. There is no doubting that business model. There is no doubting the fact that they're now drawing more in because of that business model, which works for them and is working at an unbelievable level. They have never made more money. I am not doubting that whatsoever. What they are putting on is working. At the same time, it's a very fancy, pretty presentation. It's not as gritty. I like that I like that the sets have been kind of brought down a little bit. I love that long set they walked through. I don't love all the LED lights and all that stuff like that. At the same time, it's what's working for them. They want to put on that big, loud, extravagant wrestling production. And that works. That's what's working for them. You don't doubt that. What I saw on Saturday, and I think what AEW has kind of gotten back to doing in the last 4 or 5 months, is being different in a good way. Because there were similarities to bad wrestling or bad WWE creative. There were things that popped up, and you're like, ugh, please don't do that. We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of Dynamite, which, by the way, was also the first day that the bump debuted. And we are going to get into that and what my day was like. I've talked about it a little bit on the show. I just passed the 5 years since I was hired at WWE. We're going to get into that in the coming weeks. Some bonus content if you become a Matt member at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Take a look down there. You can join. We got a lot of bonus content coming your way. My onboarding there, NXT to going to USA with the Dynamite debut, how that was perceived within the company. That is all coming your way within this month for some bonus content if you're a member at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. So certainly check that out. Really would appreciate that. And when AEW got going at the beginning, it was different in a different way. Look, you can point out production issues. I'm not saying that's a good thing. When that kind of stuff happens, especially when they bring it up on commentary, it drives me nuts. Like, you just push through it. But I like the idea of wrestling being a little grittier. And guess what? That's my opinion. I understand that's not for everybody. I understand that if you're playing to a large fan base, when you're doing all those things, that you can't go as hardcore. We talked about Blood last week. Go back, watch it. WrestlingMatchShow.com. And I think how Blood, good comment there from Dennis. We'll get to that in a second. I think Blood can be used accordingly. I think WWE has done that so far. They've done it with The Rock and Cody. They've done it a few times with Punk and Drew McIntyre. And they've pretty much limited it to that. They need Seth Rollins to have internal bleeding to sell Bronson Reed. There's reasons for all of it, and I agree with all of it. And I think it can be used in the right way. AEW's done it more. I brought up the thought that John Moxley had said, because he was asked about how much he bled and stuff, and he said, listen, if you're in a fight, you're going to bleed. And I think there's something to that. I think there's some understanding. At the same time, it's also wrestling, so there's creative license. If everybody's throwing punches, yeah, there should be a lot more bleeding and bruising. It doesn't always happen because they don't always have to hurt. That is pro wrestling. It's not all supposed to hurt. But to peak at a pay-per-view, but to peak when feuds are at the level that they're way up here, then you go to those lengths. I would assume the discourse would have been the same if it was just what we saw from Swerve and Hangman. I assume we'd be, people who are clutching their pearls or angry or saying it was too much or whatever it might be. Everything they did was enough to probably garner those reactions. You throw Moxley with the bag on Danielson on top of it, sure, it's a bit more. If you didn't like that stuff, that's fine. But I will say it fit mostly the Hangman Swerve stuff. I'll talk about the bag stuff because I have some thoughts on that. But the Hangman Swerve stuff was because it peaked the feud, because it was unsanctioned, because of everything they had done to each other over the last year. Nothing has been that personal in wrestling for quite some time. I don't know if it's the same people. I'm sure it is because it's Twitter and people just can throw opinions out and not have to call, answer for them. I do. If you're a public persona, you're doing a show like this, you have to answer for when you say stuff and get yelled at on Twitter or get agreed with, whatever it might be. But how many people were like, got to get back to the Attitude Era? I missed that stuff when they were cursing and sex and this and this and this. They did far worse, like, actual stuff in terms of, like, words that they used and racism and homophobia and degrading women just because, like, that was done back then. And people are like, bring all that. I liked when it was edgier. Not to say they're calling for all that kind of stuff, but, like, there's a lot of crap in there. There's a lot. It gets overlooked because Stone Cold was kicking ass. A lot of the main event stuff carried everything. There's a lot of crap underneath it. A lot. So to have that stuff back, just to have it, and you could definitely make the argument that at times AEW has done some violent stuff at the wrong times, not when a feud is peaking. That's fine. That is totally fine. You're justified in saying that. But if you just look at the weekend and you just look at where those feuds were getting to, I think a lot of the stuff makes sense.